Now let's talk about the core content for chapter 2. Okay. In this chapter, our main goal is to introduce the relationship among operations strategies, viewed from top to bottom. The key point is not just that there are different levels of strategy and decision making, but that these levels are connected and form a clear structure. Okay, so that's the major purpose of this chapter. Now let's start by looking at this overall strategy structure shown here. All right. In this chart, at the very top is corporate strategy. This level is usually long-term and relatively abstract. For example, a firm might aim to become a global leader in a particular product or service. Based on that, companies develop business strategies. Okay, typically cover a 3 to 5 year horizon. Business strategy is more concrete and often expressed in milestones or measurable goals. For example, a firm might aim to capture something like 30% of the global market in a specific product segment. This strategy provides a clear path for achieving or maintaining the corporate strategy. Okay. Below that, different functional areas develop their own strategies. In the dotted box, our focus is on operations strategy, which we will examine in detail. But at the same time, other functions such as marketing, such as finance, engineering, and human resources, they develop their own strategies in parallel to operations strategy. These strategies are related, but they are distinct from our focus. Now let's zoom in this part. Okay, let's zoom in the operations strategy box itself, which also follow a top-down structure with 4 levels of strategy or decisions. At the highest level is a mission of operations. This describes what operations are fundamentally trying to achieve. For example, an operations mission might be to maintain the lowest possible cost relative to competitors, while still offering a high flexibility to customers. The next level is the objective level, which is especially important because strategy must become tangible and measurable. At this level, operations goals are typically expressed across 5 categories: cost, quality, delivery, flexibility, and sustainability. Okay, let's very briefly talk about them. Cost objectives might be stated as dollar amount, as a percentage of the total revenue, or as a relative position. Quality objectives could involve customer satisfaction, defect rates, or scrap rates. Delivery objective often focus on lead time or speed. Flexibility refers to how quickly operations can adapt, such as the time required to introduce a new product. Sustainability objectives usually involve environmental, social, or economic performance indicators. These objectives, they do not change so frequently. They may be adjusted. That's a sure thing. They may be adjusted year to year, but they are not something you redefine every month. They provide stability and direction for operational decision. Now let's move to the next level. Okay, it's a decision level. This level involves the 5 major decision categories we have discussed in the previous chapter. Just quickly speaking, process, quality, capacity, inventory, and supply chain. At this stage, strategy becomes very concrete. You must make actual choice and commit resources. Because resources are limited, trade-offs must be considered and almost not avoidable. As a result of these decisions, we arrive at the final level, which is operations competence. This represents what the firm is actually good at in operations, such as maybe it's good at speed or quality or flexibility or cost efficiency. An important idea here is that firms cannot excel at everything simultaneously. You cannot be the lowest cost producer while also produce the highest quality with the maximum flexibility and the fastest delivery at the same time. Choices must be made. Okay? So later we will introduce the concept of order winners, order qualifiers, which help explain how these competencies position a firm in the market. These competencies shape how the firm competes, how customers perceive value, and how it stands relative to competitors. Taken all together, this entire boxed area represents operations strategy. Strategy is not about day-to-day operational decisions. Instead, it provides a consistent foundation that gives or guide those day-to-day, daily decisions. With a clear mission, a measurable objective, well-aligned strategic choice, firms can produce consistent pattern of behavior and consistent result over time. This is our day-to-day. Okay? In the next few slides, we will focus on selected concepts from this framework and explore them in more detail, using examples to help demonstrate or illustrate how operations strategy works in practice. All right. On this page, we are simply trying to demonstrate a few typical choices available under each categories of strategic decision. Okay, because they are the solid choice you have to make. Before going into the detail, it is important to clarify one thing, that this specific item, those single items, they are decisions you must make. They are choices, but they are not strategy by themselves. Strategy is a specific combinations of these choices, not any single decision in isolation. Okay, so now let's look at a few examples. Start with the process category. One common decision is a span of process. Okay, so which refers to what parts or components are made in-house and what are purchased from suppliers. This is not a make or buy decision for the entire product. Okay, to be clear on that. We are not talking about make or buy for the entire product, but for specific parts or subsystems. For example, many traditional automobile companies still produce their own engines and transmissions, while most other subsystems are supplied by specialized suppliers. Another process-related decision is the level of automation, which depends on factors such as production volumes and investment level. A third example is process flow. How production is organized. Is it a continuous process, or is it a batch process, or an assembly line like the classical Henry Ford factory? Okay, we will discuss these process types in much greater detail in later chapter. Next, consider quality-related decisions. A key choice here is whether quality management is primarily inspection-based or prevention-based. We will return to this distinction when we study quality management in more depth. For capacity, typical decisions involve facility location and size. Should a company rely on one large facility or several medium-sized factories? Should production be located domestically or overseas? These decisions directly affect the cost, flexibility, and risk. In the inventory category, firms must decide on inventory policies. How much inventory to hold, where? This also connects to distribution system design. Should inventory be centralized in one or two very large distribution centers, or spread across many smaller warehouses nationwide? Finally, supply chain decisions. which include choices about outsourcing versus insourcing, and even whether to bring previously outsourced activities back in-house. Firms must also decide what kind of relationship they want with a specific supplier. Should it be a deep collaborative partnership, or is a more transactional, cost-focused bidding relationship? These are just examples, but decisions like this must be made in almost every operations management setting. As mentioned earlier, the textbook and the whole course are organized around these 5 categories: process, quality, capacity, inventory, and supply chain. We will study each of them in sequence, explore their trade-offs, and sometimes use frameworks or even formulas to identify optimal decisions. Let me emphasize one key point again. These are decisions, each of them, okay? Not strategy. Strategy is a consistent combinations of certain configurations that make it an effective or a valid strategy. You cannot mix configurations randomly. For example, if your strategy is to compete primarily on low cost, you cannot rely on low volume or job shop style process. Instead, you need large-scale production methods such as assembly lines or even continuous process. On the other hand, if your strategy emphasizes flexibility or fast fashion, then certain supply chain choice, such as slow but inexpensive ocean shipping, may not be appropriate. Even though ocean shipping is cheaper, it does not align well with strategies that require speed, rapid product changes, and short life cycles. These are just examples. On the previous page, we focused mainly on operational level strategic decisions. On this page, we move one level higher and briefly introduce supply chain related strategies. These strategies are broader in scope and are closely tied to the market and product characteristics. If you look at the top part of the table, it describes typical market and product conditions that align with different supply chain strategies. A common way to categorize product is to distinguish between functional products and innovative products. Functional products tend to emphasize cost and basic utility. They are usually mature products with long life cycle, relatively low contribution margins, and very stable demand. As a result, forecasting errors are low. Customers expect high availability, and stock out rate are expected to be very low. On the other hand, innovative products are quite different. They often involve new technologies, new design, and have much shorter life cycle, and generate higher contribution margins because they are new, right? Demand is highly uncertain. Forecasting errors are large, and customers are generally more tolerant of stocking out. End of season markdown are also more common for those innovative products. Corresponding to these product characteristics are 2 broad supply chain strategies: efficient and responsive. These strategies are designed to match the nature of the products. Okay, so an efficient supply chain focuses on cost minimization. To achieve low cost, operations must be highly predictable. In manufacturing, this means emphasizing high utilization of the production resources, standardized processes, and stable production plans. A responsive supply chain, on contrast, is designed to react quickly to uncertainties and changes. For innovative product, firms often maintain a buffer capacity, okay? So they can respond rapidly if demand suddenly increases, instead of invest heavily in capacity upfront. Firms preserve the ability to scale up quickly once a product shows signs of success. Inventory policy also differ. Efficient supply chains emphasize high inventory turnover and fast, smooth inventory flow. Well, the responsive supply chains rely more on buffer inventory to protect against demand uncertainty. Supplier relationship reflect these differences as well. In the efficient supply chain, suppliers are typically selected based on cost and quality. In a responsive supply chain, suppliers are chosen for their speed, for their flexibility and reliability, even if they are not, they may be more expensive. The key takeaway from this page is that supply chain strategies are not numerous, but they are very distinct. Efficient and responsive supply chains represent two different bundles of decisions. Each bundle must be internally consistent and aligned with the product and market conditions it is designed to serve. On this page, we link operations decision and operations strategy back to the higher level of strategies of the firm. The goal here is to show how operations connect to business strategy and what a company can realistically expect from a given set of operations choice. From a business strategies perspective, firms typically choose among a few broad strategic directions. One example is, which is also one of the most common examples, is low-cost strategy. If a firm pursues low cost, it expects operations to produce highly standardized product and services. Only through standardization and efficiency can low cost be achieved. Okay. Another common option is differentiation strategy. In this case, the firm may compete on speed, maybe on quality, innovation, or some other distinctive attributes. To support this strategy, operations must be more flexible, whether in processes, labor, technology, or supplier relationships. As we discussed earlier in this chapter, a critical limitation applies here. No firm can be excellent at everything. Strategic choices necessarily involve trade-offs. Okay, so when a firm emphasizes certain dimensions, others cannot receive the same level of emphasis. To understand how these choices matter in the market, it helps to look at operations performance. Okay, this is result, this is performance. It helps to look at operations performance from the customer's perspective. We typically classify performance dimensions into three categories: order winners, order qualifiers, and in a very special case, I mean, it's not even a valid case, order losers. Okay? Order winners are the factors that cause customers to choose one firm, ideally your firm, over its competitors. These dimensions must stand out and clearly superior. Okay, be superior. Sometimes it is not a single factor, but a specific combination of factors that creates this competitive advantage. Okay. At the same time, all other performance dimensions must meet a minimum acceptable level. These are called order qualifiers. Even if cost is your order winner, for example, delivery speed and quality still need to be acceptable. Customers will not tolerate extremely slow delivery or poor quality, even from a low-cost provider. If a firm fails to meet the minimum standard on an important dimension, that dimension becomes an order loser. In that case, the firm is not even considered a viable option in the market. This framework helps connect the big picture strategy, whether the corporate or business strategy, to what operations can and must deliver. For example, in a Walmart style model, cost must be the order winner, while quality and delivery reliability they function as order qualifiers. Across industries, the same logic applies. firms must choose which dimensions will serve as order winners, while ensuring all the other major dimensions meet qualifying standard. Operations strategy is the mechanism that makes this choice feasible and consistent over time. This page. This course, remember, used to be called Sustainable Operations. So it is important that we continue to maintain a strong sustainability component throughout the course. As a result, we will often look at specific topic through a sustainable operations lens. For this slide, I want to first clarify that when we say sustainable operations, or more broadly, sustainability, very often sustainability is misunderstood as being only about environmental issues. No matter it's green technology or planting more trees, but in reality, sustainability is much broader than that. Sustainability is commonly described using the 3 Ps. It's also called the 3P framework. The first P is profit, okay, which refers to economic sustainability. A firm must be profitable, but more importantly, it must be profitable in a way that it is sustainable in the long run. This allows the company to remain responsible to shareholders, to its employees, to other stakeholders over time, and to continue operating as a viable organization within its community. The second P is people, which represent social responsibility. Sustainability is not just about the firm itself, but also about its impact on employees, on its local communities, and on society in general. This perspective often extends beyond the boundaries of the company. For example, when making sourcing decisions, firm may consider whether suppliers operate under decent working conditions, paying fair wages, and follow ethical labor practices. Social responsibility can also include supporting broader social goals. Firms may give preference to suppliers that are women-owned or veteran-owned or otherwise aligned with other specific social objectives. These are just examples, but they illustrate the idea that sustainability involves being responsible to people, both inside and outside the organization. The third P is planet, which refers to environmental stewardship. Okay, so this includes reducing environmental impact, conserving resources, and protecting the natural environment. This is the aspect of sustainability most of us are familiar with, so I will not go into detail here. To summarize, sustainability and related concepts, such as corporate social responsibility, CSR, has 3 dimensions. It's about environmental responsibility, economic sustainability, and social responsibility. A sustainable operations strategy must consider all 3, not just one. Okay,